and I worry about this with my own kids, that I think deprivation creates motivation.
Totally.
Especially to do something as hard as create a company, create a startup.
Creates motivation.
Welcome to David Sacks' infomercial.
No. I mean, look, I think,
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That leads to fornication.
Beep.
Beep. Our friend Beep
has a saying that sort of became famous when Elon then repeated it, which is that creating a startup is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And it is really hard to create these companies when they're successful. And so not a lot of people want to do it again once they've reached that point. And, it does take a certain amount of, like I said, deprivation, to do this stuff.
Totally agree.
Which is why giving everybody the participation trophy and trying to make people's lives as easy as possible. I mean, yes, you don't want to deprive people on the one hand, but on the other hand, it does often lead to good things.
Totally agree. We're seeing a bit of a dry run of this if people believe that, they have UBI or the government's going to take care of them. I would be fine with UBI, everybody getting a little bit of money. And if it was a safety net, the only thing I worry about is it seems like a little bit of money, if you're clever, means you could never work. And then what happens to those people in society, right? Well,
I think it's anti-compassionate, because what you do is you kick out the bottom rungs of the ladder of economic success when you basically pay able-bodied people not to work. I mean, they need those entry-level jobs that may not pay much better than the UBI are an important stepping stone to where they get to next in their career. And I think it's demotivating. And we've already seen in California, we've been doing this.
UBI is not going to pay you to go to college, but Amazon will, as an example. So you're absolutely right. There's the GI Bill. There's all kinds of examples where in history we've used, entry-level jobs as exactly as they're meant to be, an entry-level opportunity, an on-ramp to work your ass off and to make something of yourself. If you all of a sudden let people opt out of it, then it's going to be a very, what they're not going to realize is by the time they get old enough where they will want to have some kind of purpose, it'll be too late. Because then activating yourself in your 40s and 50s to essentially start your life is really hard. I'll give you an example of this. Right now I would say I'm like fairly fluent in Italian.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah,
but I started taking Italian lessons, and the last 4 or 5% of a language is brutalizing, right? Because it's every little grammatical thing. You want to get it completely right, and it's very demotivating for me sometimes, because I'm like, God, why the fuck am I doing this? I don't have to. I can get it by, just speak it. But I've made a commitment to myself. Same thing in biotech. I got introduced to it by Friedberg and obviously Nat, and now I'm trying to learn. And it is a grind. And I think it's so easy to quit. Now you take that to the extreme, and some random person that doesn't have necessarily the ability to fall back on the success that we've all collectively had, and you have to start from scratch. My God, it's really tough. It's really tough. At our age, right. It is just hard. Kids are screaming in the background. You're trying to manage all this stuff. It's impossible. So,
you think it's easier when you're in your early 20s?
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
But why is it easier when you're in your early 20s? Isn't it always a grind to learn something and push yourself, to develop yourself? I mean,
you have nothing. So the theory is you have some motivation to get something, right?
But if you still have nothing,
you're going to climb up the mountain because staying at the shore means you can go washed out to sea or something.
I spent hours and hours and hours working. Yeah. Hours and hours and hours.
Me too.
In my 20s and 30s, it was 10 to 16 hour days.
I couldn't leave the office.
Is that different today?
Yeah. I don't work in the same way I did before because I'm trying to do a different job. But I've earned the right, and I've now put myself under pressure to do it differently because I have a different job to do.
Right.
But when I was in my 20s and I was a PM, grinding out a product or, writing a feature spec or, building a model and trying to put all these things together, it was so much thankless work. I learned a ton, and it was all worth it.
Right.
I was about to ask you, do you regret it or not?
Yeah. No, look, this is the thing about this is the thing about work-life balance that the people are always complaining about. People who are working too hard don't realize is that, you want to think about work-life balance, but across your entire life. I mean, one of the things you'll do in your 20s is work much harder to set yourself up to where you want to be in your 50s. And so Chamath doesn't have to work as hard in his 50s because he worked much harder earlier in his life, and now he's got the skill set where he can delegate more. I think we really shortchange people when we tell them as young people that they don't need to work hard, or in the extreme case of UBI, that we're actually paying people not to work. That's not developing the right habits that are going to make them successful later on.
And in fairness, though, if you look at minimum wage and you look at entry-level jobs, many of them paid too little historically. These companies like McDonald's, I know it's a free market, but we're paying very little. We're talking $7, $8 an hour and no benefits. And, this is kind of unnecessary greed in my mind. And I think that's what we're seeing.
My first job was at Burger King. I made $4.55 an hour.
Yeah. I made $4.25 an hour in 1996. That was my first job cleaning a pool. Yeah.
$2.50 for me when I worked at Fordham's computer center. I think it was $3 it had gone to. But when I started in the workforce in '88, it was $2.50 was the minimum wage. What was the minimum wage where you were, David?
What was it like in the 19th century, Sacks?
Yeah, tell us.
when I was working at
when you tilled the fields.
I remember when I was in college, I worked at a bar, I was there drinking so much. I finally was like, "Why don't you just give me a job? So I might as well make some money while I'm sitting here." And they paid me $7 an hour. That's what I did my senior year.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That's a pretty well-paying job. $7 an hour.
One of the other problems with UBI that Larry Summers he's the former U.S. Secretary of Treasury, has been on the record about, is the inflationary effect. So, there are pretty smart economists like himself who kind of highlight that as you give everyone, $10,000 a year, first of all, it's going to cost $10 trillion or whatever the estimate is to kind of fund that sort of program. Suddenly the cost of a burger goes from 49 cents to 99 cents or 99 cents to $1.99 because there's, much greater demand on that kind of area of the economy for consumption. And so you see an inflationary effect, which trickles its way through. And so what ends up happening ultimately is by pumping more of that money in for free without productivity coming out of it, you effectively see inflation. And so it wipes itself out. And so this is kind of one economic theory on UBI, is that it can actually just end up being within 10 years completely useless and pointless, because then the basic cost of living climbs so much that you need to raise the UBI again to give people basic living expenses. And so it becomes this kind of nasty runaway effect. So it's not really sustainable is one argument that's made against UBI. But, obviously different point than what we were kind of saying a moment ago. Anyway,
I think people don't know what they want, and if they get it, they're going to. A form of UBI does make sense, and I do think we need to subsidize folks. But I think maybe it's probably just a fancier word for welfare. I grew up on welfare, and I can tell you that I don't think our family benefited from it. Psychologically, we benefited from it socioeconomically because we needed it to not starve. But the knock-on effects of when you're in that loop of, again, being in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, not finding purpose, which my parents had to struggle through, coping, you cope with alcohol, you cope with depression, the knock-on effects to your kids. I don't think we want to see that. And so when people think about UBI, I think they need to understand that, we've run a long experiment in this thing called welfare. What welfare does. A lot of us have felt it, and there needs to be a better way. Because if you just let people opt out, I don't think you really understand what happens over long durations of time when you're not doing anything.
It's getting really weird right now, right? I mean, the fact that restaurants are closing that have customers, but they can't operate. And so we're starting to actually see the effect of it, in some service.
What's the open job stat right now? It's like 9 million open jobs in the US.
It's been bouncing from 8 to 10 million. Yeah.
There's more unfilled jobs than there are unemployed people, right?
Yeah.
Or unemployment is high, but unfilled jobs is even higher.
Yeah.
We've somehow moved away from a political consensus we had in the 1990s that I think made a lot of sense when Bill Clinton passed welfare reform with, a lot of Republican support so look, we need to have a welfare system. We need to take care of people who either can't work or can't find a job for a good reason. There needs to be a social safety net. But if you're an able-bodied person who can find a job, you should be working. And that welfare reform they passed in the 90s did lead to a lot of people finding meaningful work, which I think resulted in happier lives. And somehow we've moved off that political consensus that everyone kind of agrees, yes, social safety net, but able-bodied people should work, to now we have this elite it's really an elite ideology of UBI, which is, look, we're going to pay people not to work, which I just think is sort of like un-American.
And isn't it also like a little insulting being like, you know what, don't even bother working. You're making too little money. We'll just give you money. It's
like,
it feels insulting to people's dignity. I'll be honest. Like, I wouldn't want to take it. I would rather go out and I was a waiter or a busboy. I'll go be a waiter or a busboy and make enough money to pay my rent. And whatever.
One of the things
I don't want it for free.
Yeah. One of the things you hear is, well, your job's going to be replaced by a machine anyway. It's not productive work. So why don't we just pay you to sit back and, take yourself out of the economy? Well, like you said, the unfilled jobs number shows that even with all the automation that's happening in the economy, and that's a trend that will continue, there's still a need for, human labor. And I think there always will be. And it's a little bit too soon to be throwing in the towel on the idea that entire groups of people can't productively work.
Does everybody believe able-bodied people should work and not get free money?
It's not that it should or shouldn't. I think the question is what's in folks' best interests.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, but yeah. So, is it in people's best interests? I'll phrase it the way you're saying. Is it in people's best interests?
I think the point where we're going to go wrong is when we couple UBI with actually having to work or not work, and I don't think that's the right idea. I think we have to do a decent job of letting people find the things that they want to work on, because everybody can find something that they want to work on. And that shouldn't exclude you or disqualify you from getting UBI, so that all that does is then just raise the general standard of living. I think that idea is better. The problem is when we talk about UBI, what we are talking about it is in the exact way, Jason, that you said, which is letting people opt out. So,
I mean, think about how privileged that is. There are places in the world where there's not enough jobs and people are like, wait a second, an American has to be fulfilled with their job selection in addition to getting a job? That just seems like the height of entitlements. Like, sometimes you just need a job because you need money to pay your bills, right? But you're saying if you get job candidate, citizen fit, the uptick will be better.
UBI is a benefit. It's like universal healthcare. We don't make a decision about universal healthcare based on who does or does not have a job. And so UBI should basically be about evening, the bottom few rungs of economic viability so that everybody has a reasonable ability to have a decent life. That's a nice idea. I think that makes a ton of sense. But coupling it to having to work or not work, where some people say, oh, great, I can take this money and not work, is the wrong way to figure this out.